So the second question says, "In How to Tell a True War Story, O'Brien writes, a true war story is never moral. It does not instruct nor encourage virtue, nor suggest models of proper human behavior, nor restrain men from doing the things men have always done. If a story seems moral, do not believe it. If at the end of a war story you feel uplifted, or if you feel that some small bit of rectitude has been salvaged from the larger waste, then you have been made the victim of a very old and terrible lie. There is no rectitude whatsoever, there is no virtue. As a first rule of thumb, therefore, you can tell a true war story by its absolute and uncompromising allegiance to obscenity and evil." And I think that's a really good quote, and I think it's pretty funny, to be honest. I think war stories definitely get kind of put on a little bit of a pedestal, because wars might be the most interesting, like, thing humans honestly do. It's life and death, and camaraderie, and bravery, and courage, and no matter how you put it, war makes for a good story. Let's be honest, it's a good setting, and I think sometimes because of that, when you put it on this pedestal, everyone thinks it's like it always has to be super profound. Like there's a moral to the story. There's always a lesson to it, and that's the thing, though. War doesn't stop humans from being human, and even war stories can be just as dumb and stupid as any other story in any other setting. And I think I want to focus on that, the the obscenity and evil. And I just want to make an interjection really quick and shout out three stories that also kind of fit this description. Or I guess I really just want to talk about Kiowa's stuff. I think that's how you pronounce his name. It's talked about in Speaking of Courage, Notes, and In the Field, and I just think Kyo's death is a kind of a perfect example of the obscenity and evil, because his death isn't like Valorant or very noble. He literally dies in a shit field of like shit, and it kind of just goes to describe like the evilness and hopelessness and just pointless deaths that happen in war, and specifically the Vietnam War. So that would have been also another good example for how war stories a lot of times don't have any morals or virtue to them. It's just obscenity and evil and death and destruction and shit. What first came to mind when I read that quote was the Enemies and Friends, those two short stories. They're basically like, even though it's technically two stories, they go along with each other, so I'm gonna just like treat them as one. So in Enemies, um, these two guys, Lee Strunk and Dave Jensen, get into a fist fight on over pretty much something stupid. It's like a lost jackknife, and Dave Jensen ends up beating the guy's face in. And for the rest of the story, he's like super paranoid that Lee Strunk is gonna get his payback, and it gets to a point where he is like so afraid of that he ends up just breaking his own nose as a way to rectify his actions, and then he like goes over and they you know shake hands and whatnot and are friends, but not entirely, not just yet, not yet. And then in the next story, Friends, um it's about how these two guys, they make a pact about, if someone were to get seriously injured, the other one would just shoot them and put them out of their misery. So Lee Strung ends up dying in the end, which Dave Jensen is relieved from. And it seems like Dave Jensen was almost more loyal to the pack than it was to his friend, which kind of kills any of like the virtue or moral you would get from the story. And I think that kind of plays into the hand of how this could actually truly be a true war story, because I mean it is very obscene. Like you could call Dave Jensen a little bit evil for not caring about the death of Lee Strunk, But I kind of think this goes to show how these soldiers had very weird tendencies as a way to cope with the enormous amounts of stress they are dealing with in this war. And although it might seem um it would be nice to think that these guys end up becoming best friends, and after the fight they become best friends after the fight because of the war and the camaraderie. It just doesn't play out that way because, well, a war is chaos, and so are humans, and everyone kind of copes in different ways. So the moral of these two stories is that, well, there really isn't one, and that's kind of the funny bit to me. These two guys were just coping in weird ways, and that in itself is the story. Pretty funny, I guess.